This is how and why your very worst fears can sometimes come true, and what you need to do to take control of your self-sabotaging ways. Back in 2018, I published my first book. This isn't a sales pitch, I promise, it's relevant. And in that book, every chapter begins with a little vignette of my life. In other words, a small passage of creative writing. And at the beginning of the process, when people asked me how the book writing was going, I kept saying, yeah, it's going well, I think. At least the sciencey, logical parts are anyway. I'm not so sure about the story stuff because I'm no good at creative writing. Now, at some point, after saying those words multiple times, I finally heard myself. I was literally writing a book about limiting beliefs while simultaneously not just living in the thrall of this particular self-doubt, but also broadcasting it to anyone who asked. Excellent. However, as funny as this was, I didn't see it as a failure, not even at the time, because that's how belief works. Nothing that we believe is necessarily true, but every belief we hold will absolutely feel true. So much so that we will not question it or even notice it. As far as we're concerned, it's just how things are. That is, until it's not. I'm going to come back to my example in just a moment. First, my name's Hazel Gale. I'm a former therapist turned author and creator of the fantasy mental health game Betwixt. And this short video is for anyone who would love to rewrite their own stories of self-doubt. So there is a complex matrix of beliefs in your unconscious mind, as unique as your fingerprint. And it grows as you accumulate experiences, especially when you're young. Parts of it will be positive, such as I'm good at maths, or beautiful, or lucky, or my parents are happy. And other parts of this matrix, of course, will be negative, such as I'm untalented, stupid, or bad with numbers, men or women are dangerous, or mice or spiders are life-threatening. As a whole, this system of beliefs acts like a kind of filter through which you view the world. It influences your interpretation of everything you come in contact with. It guides you in your decision-making, from your outfit selection to your choice of life partner. And some beliefs can become so bound to your sense of identity that they begin to limit the life you live and the person you become. The limiting beliefs that tend to do the most damage are the ones that have been around a long time. This isn't because they're ingrained necessarily. It has more to do with the fact that we arrived at these decisions before our brains were capable of understanding any real nuance. Exaggerated conclusions are easy to arrive at when we're young. We think differently when we're children. The world is binary. Things are either good or bad. We win or we lose. We are loved or we're unlovable. This means that negative experiences in our formative years can lead to very, very negative beliefs. An event that causes someone to reassess their beliefs, values, or worldview is known as a significant emotional event, or SEE. But if happening early in life, an event doesn't need to be any more dramatic than tripping over in the school nativity play or getting told off for drawing on the walls, because those things are significant to a child. So we don't need to have experienced big, objectively traumatic things as children to wind up with limiting beliefs. We all have them because literally anything we happen to interpret negatively can lead to a limiting belief. And when something like this happens, the child has basically two options. They could simply accept the message, either by submitting entirely to the negative perspective or by healthily integrating failure into their model of the world. Or they can reject it by deciding that no, they're going to show you that they're not a failure or stupid or bad or whatever the message was. Just look what they can do. And off they go on a mission to prove something wrong that was almost certainly made up in the first place, but still holds incredible power. Which is why that one friend who is convinced they're unattractive or stupid or fundamentally undeserving will never accept your perfectly logical evidence to the contrary. They are fighting a long-standing battle with an inner ghost of past pain which we, as their friends, cannot touch. But it's not just our friends, is it? We all have self-doubt and therefore limiting beliefs, and without awareness of the roots of our fears, any attempt to disprove our sense of inadequacy via achievement or success falls flat. This is because the negative message is already camped out in the mind as a truth. Otherwise, we wouldn't be bothered by it. So all of that striving and rebellion rarely disproves the belief. Rather, it strengthens it by repeatedly referencing it. But please know that we aren't stuck with our limiting beliefs. We just need to tackle them differently. And there are a number of ways to do this. First, there are so many avenues of help. If you're really struggling with shame, self-doubt, or fear, please consider seeking professional help. If you're in the UK, you can get talking therapy through the NHS, currently at least, which is an amazing thing. Don't be afraid to ask your GP. There are, however, some things you can also do solo. Here I want to share a simple overarching framework for you to get started with. First, you need to build awareness. Just like my I can't do creative writing belief, until you've made a limiting belief conscious, it will simply seem like reality and will therefore hide in plain sight. So you need to start by opening your eyes to the possibility that not everything you think to be true about yourself or your place in the world is true. Beliefs are not the truth, they just feel like the truth. There are things that you are certain of right now that if you just looked at from another angle or looked back on a few years later would appear like utter nonsense. And if you want to find those false ideas, the very first place to look is at your personal fears, your self-doubt, your shame. Because the vast majority of that stuff, maybe even all of it, is based on lies. So pay attention to the language you use to talk about yourself. Look out for the absolutes like I can't, or I'm just not good at, I'm always X and I'm never Y. If you're brave enough and have somebody appropriate in your life, ask a friend what they think you erroneously believe about yourself. Finally, a great way to catch a limiting belief is to journal about your thoughts and feelings and behaviours, but then come back and read it about a week or so later, when whatever it is that you've been writing about has calmed down a little bit. It is amazing to see just how ludicrous some of the fearful things we can write suddenly seem after a bit of time. Then, when you've caught the limiting belief in the act, take some time to play with the possibility of a different reality. Don't try and force the opposite. I'm not a huge fan of grand affirmations. If you believe that you're fundamentally stupid, I think you could waste a long time in front of the mirror repeating the words "I'm a genius" before anything shifts. A better strategy, in my opinion, is to gently encourage your mind into a learning state in relation to the idea you're tackling. In other words, get creative about it. Try asking yourself the question, and what if I'm not quite stupid? What if I deleted that one thought from my mind? What else might be true? And just notice what comes up. If genius is a stretch, and let's be honest, it is for most of us, maybe you can get closer to believing that you are inventive, or that you're good at connecting with people, or that you have common sense. Maybe you can think of lots of times when those things felt more true than "I'm stupid." And if so, call those times to mind. Visualize yourself acting that way again in the future. Or you can talk this through with a friend, or you can journal about your more positive take, because they might not seem like much to start with, but all of these smaller, brighter ideas are like little nudges. They're like a little animal that gradually nibbles away at the hulking bulk of the belief. Because that's the way to make a change like this, bit by bit. Imagine for a moment that you're teaching a small child how to do something like algebra. You don't start with the quadratic equation. You start with maybe A equals B, and then from that seed of an idea, the child could just maybe grow up to be the next Pythagoras. You never know. The point is that to make a change, you need to gently get familiar with the version of the world and the version of yourself that you want to grow into. It may take a little time, or you might surprise yourself with how quickly things can seem different. Either way, support yourself along the journey, because you can learn to believe something new. I promise you. And that new stuff, by the way, can sometimes turn out to be the exact thing that was missing from your world. Back when I was writing my book and I saw my limiting belief for what it was like I'd cracked open a treasure trove that had been under lock and key for my entire life. And while at first it was daunting as hell, over time I learned to love digging through my own creativity to just see what would come out. In the end, the more creative things I wrote in my book became my favourite parts. And since then, play, creativity and storytelling have literally become my life, my job and my purpose. I would never have believed this 10 years ago. So I guess my parting question for you is this. What could you be missing out on just because you've never let yourself consider it a possibility? As always, I really hope this helps. And if it does, please like and share the video so others can find it too. And finally, if you would like to take an epic, creative journey through a magical world in the name of personal growth, then you can download my fantasy mental health game, Betwixt, which is available on the iOS App Store and Google Play.